Great. Okay, I think we are going to kick things off. Hi, everyone. On behalf of Women for Change, thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, a good handful of us are located in Hamilton, Ontario, and we want to acknowledge that we are meeting on stolen land. The city of Hamilton is situated on the territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee, and is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. As a visitor on this land, I strive to deepen my own understanding of the local Indigenous communities and to reframe my responsibilities to both land and community. At Hamilton Community Foundation, we recognize the inequalities that are present as a result of colonization. We are committed to uplifting Indigenous voices, respecting traditional lands, and working towards reconciliation. Thank you for joining us. We are so thrilled to have Fallon Farinacci with us today. We will be turning the mic over to her soon, but wanted to run through a couple things. For those that I don't know, I'm Shyla McIntyre. I administer the Women for Change Fund at Hamilton Community Foundation. Women for Change is a giving circle that brings together like-minded women in Hamilton. Currently, we have almost 60 members. We work together to improve the lives of girls and women in Hamilton. We do this through learning, through inspiring, investing, and transforming ourselves as philanthropists. If you'd like to learn more about Women for Change, please visit our website. I will put that in the chat for you in a minute. Thank you again to the Women for Change members on the call today for hosting us. In terms of today's agenda, Fallon will be speaking to us first, followed by a Q&A. We encourage you to put questions in the chat box throughout Fallon's remarks, and we will circle back to those. Personally, it's a very exciting day for me. I have been following Fallon and her work for years, and I'm beyond moved that she is with us today and that you all get the chance to hear from her. Fallon is a Red River Métis. She is a speaker, survivor, and advocate for MMIWG. And with that, Fallon, I will turn the mic over to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I wanted to send you a text this morning just to say how grateful I am, but I thought, well, a text doesn't do it justice if I can see you somewhat face to face. So I want to just say thank you so much for reaching out. And I'm honored to be here. I was sharing last night on social media how, getting to know Women for Change and all of the work that's being done, I thought that's a room that I want to be in. That's, this is an event that I wish, not that I don't wish any of the other ones that I've done virtually haven't been in person, but my goodness, this would have been so filling for me and my spirit to be in person with everyone. So for now, we'll have to do this, but maybe in the future, I'll be able to sit and talk and hear from everyone here today virtually, but in person next time. So before I get started, I just wanted to let everyone know you see my bio, excuse me. However, some of the things I'm going to cover today, I just want to forewarn you that I will be speaking about some very heavy topics. I'm going to speak about violence against women and girls, two-spirited LGBTQIA+ people. I will also talk about suicide and murder as well. And so I just wanted to let you know, please, if you need to now, as I warn you, if you have someone there that can support you, if you know that that's something that's going to trigger you, please reach out to them, have a friend on standby on the phone. And if you have to leave, I will not be offended whatsoever. And I completely understand if you need to step away, if it's something that is not something that you want to continue to sit through. It will not in any way affect my spirit. So please know that ahead of time. I also want to start by, first I'll acknowledge the land that I'm on. I'm not far from most of you. If majority of people are in Hamilton, my 2 feet are currently planted in St. Catharines, Ontario. And I am a visitor here to these lands as well. These are the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people. And I myself am a visitor. I'm from Treaty 1, so I'm just from west of Winnipeg. And that's where I call home. My soul calls home. So I'm honored to actually have spent most of my life here. This is where my mother grew up. And so that's how I came to be here in St. Catharines. I also want to acknowledge that today is not technically Louis Riel Day. So here in Ontario, we celebrate Family Day, and in Manitoba, it's known as Louis Riel Day. But today is an important day for Métis people. I am Métis, and today would be another day to celebrate the life of Louis Riel, our leader. 136 years ago today, he was hung for treason, and to the Métis people, he was murdered by the Canadian government with the intention of erasing Métis people. With him, they truly thought that the Métis Nation would die. And 136 years later, I am still here and the Métis Nation is still here. So this is the first time I'm wearing my sash, this colored sash. And I thought it was so perfect. Excuse me, I have a lump in my throat. This sash was gifted to me in September by my aunt's sister, who works very close with our Métis Nation in Manitoba, so the Manitoba Métis Federation. And this was gifted to me because of the work that I've done within the communities. So we do have several different colored sashes. The one that you might know as our traditional sash would be the red one with different weavings of wool through it. However, this one here was gifted to me by a Métis group of women. And you cannot purchase this sash. The others, yes, you can purchase. There is no protocol around being gifted the other ones. But this one you do have to be gifted. And so I thought, what better day to wear it than today with all of you? And I'm wearing it with honor as I speak for Louis Riel today and for my ancestors and my family. So thank you. I'm going to go back to, as I mentioned, I live in rural Manitoba in a predominantly Métis community. And I'm still working through saying this. I like to say that I lived a very normal life, whatever that might look like. When I say that, I say it in the sense of what I'm about to tell you is to qualify myself that it shouldn't have happened, when in reality it shouldn't have happened to anyone. But because of colonization, I have this belief that I have to tell you that I'm deserving of it. And like I said, no one would be deserving of it. So my father is Métis, a very proud Métis. He was the president for the Southwest Division for the Manitoba Métis Federation. I grew up with my culture around me. I was surrounded by it. I knew that I was Métis, and my father at a very young age ensured that I knew to be proud of who I was and who my ancestors were. And my mother, as I said, was from here, from the Niagara region. And they met and they raised us, myself, my young brother, and my older brother in our little community. And when I say little, it was about 300 people and still holding strong. And so it's, as I mentioned, a predominantly Métis community. And everything seemed, normal. And then just before my 9th birthday in November of '92, a close family friend had slowly grew increasingly obsessed with my mother. He was a family friend. Later, he would be coined as the town bully. He was a Métis man as well. And my father had grew up with him. He obviously had endured many traumas of his own. And that's not my story to tell, that's his. And so he became obsessed with my mom, so much to the point my parents had missed his birthday, in the sense that it wouldn't have been something that they would normally have celebrated. But at this time, he had become so in love with my mother that he was sent spiraling on his birthday. And he called my parents and he asked them, specifically my mother, why she missed his birthday. And to that, he followed to tell her that she wouldn't live to see her next birthday, and neither he, and he couldn't live without her. This was something that was slowly coming to, and it just spiraled, as far as I've been told by my family. So as I mentioned, I was just shy of 9. My parents did a very good job at not really letting us know what was happening. My father was a volunteer firefighter for our local community. And so the most that they alluded to the fact that we were in any type of danger was that if there's ever an emergency, to call 911 and let them know that you are Morris Paul's daughter. So my parents' names were Morris and Jerry Paul. And so that evening of the threat, my mom took it very seriously because she was genuinely scared. My father's best friend, who is now my adoptive dad, he tells me that my father was just as scared. And I wasn't actually aware of the fear that my father felt during this whole time either. And I only learned of that in the last year. And so they called the local RCMP office, and officers did come out to our home, which again, I was not there for, and they took a statement from my mother. And my mother expressed that she was extremely concerned that he had a .22 caliber rifle. At that time, the RCMP did go and arrest him. They did not search his home. And they did not let the judge know of my mother's concerns of this weapon. And unfortunately, the judge that evening didn't order a search of his home or any seizure of his weapons, or put any conditions on his bail as to like restricting alcohol or drug use, both of which he was known for. I knew this at 9 of how much he drank. Like, it was always talked about in our community because he was an alcoholic, and it was open to everyone. And at 9, that would be something I would be more sheltered from, but I remember this very clearly. And so these 2 RCMP officers were community members. They did know him themselves. This man has had 13 prior incidences with the police and charges, one of which was holding a woman hostage. Thankfully, my adoptive dad actually unintentionally stumbled across the whole situation, and the woman was freed. And so this all happened this month, actually 29 years ago. And then in December, my mother followed up with the RCMP because he continued to threaten my parents, and there was a restraining order against him, against my mother. Unfortunately, there was not one put against us for him contacting us. Thankfully, at that time, he did not contact any of the children or my father. And so in December, my mother wrote the RCMP a letter because it's 1992, and that's, I guess, the way things would be done. And so she wrote a letter to tell him that she was concerned about this .22 caliber rifle again, as well as a revolver. He had gone around town telling people he was going to kill Sherry and Morris. He could not live without her. If he couldn't live with her, then no one could. And so my mother made that complaint, and again, that letter fell on deaf ears and nothing was done. Then in January, there was a mediation. there was a slip up in the courts, and they put my parents' court case in family law instead of criminal law. This man was not a family member. And so there was a mistake yet again. And then there was a clerk who was on a temporary position at the time. And she accidentally sent this man my mother's court documents, and my mother received all of his. At that time, I'm told by my mother's family that she had lost all faith in the justice system. And they were supposed to meet with for the mediation. And again, my parents were not understanding as to why this was going through family court. Nothing was being done, nothing was being sorted. And unfortunately, the day of the mediation, it sent him spiraling even further. And he did go around telling people that he was going to kill my parents. And so, and of course, they were unaware of it. My parents never went to the mediation. My mother had no interest in taking part in that whatsoever. And he came to our house just after midnight on January 26th. And unfortunately, my older brother opened the door. He thought it was a friend coming over. Fortunately, that friend fell asleep and never came to our house. This whole scenario has rippled through so many other people's lives that I can sit back and see that it's not just our family that was affected by everything. This friend of my brother has reached out to me in the past few years with his own grief and trauma from the entire situation. So I want you to know, like, this isn't all on me. This isn't the story that just I solely carry. This is the story of so many people that have been affected by this. And so he entered our home just after midnight, and he held my brother hostage in the basement for a couple hours. We, of course, were all asleep upstairs. He verbally tortured my brother, and shortly after, he made his way upstairs, and he shot and killed my father. My father died almost instantly. And then for the next 6 hours, my mother, my younger brother, and I were held hostage by this man. We tried to call 911 several times. The first 911 call went in just after 2:30 in the morning, when my older brother actually escaped from the basement. And he went to a nearby neighbor's, who happened to be my best friend and my parents' best friend, and are now the people that I call my adoptive parents. And my father grew up with my adoptive mom and father. And so they knew the severity of the situation. When my brother went there, they called 911. At the time, it wasn't 911 because we're in a rural community. You have to dial a 7-digit number. And I know that doesn't seem like a big difference. And a lot of people probably don't even think when I say that part of the story. But when I was calling for help, dialing 7 digits was long, and it was in my instinct to dial 911 first, which I obviously did not get through the first time I tried to call. And so when my brother called, he let them know what was happening. He told them his name. They knew the situation. And the dispatcher called the 2 officers that were on duty for our area. They live in Winnipeg, which is about 40 minutes away. And so from Winnipeg, they then had to go to the closest 911 dispatch area office, which was theirs. And that's in Headingley. And so that's about 30 minutes from my community. So they had to leave their homes and go there. Instead, what they have to do first is call the chain of command. So they had to call the constable and let him know that this man had entered our home. They knew. They said the Paul residence, and they called him by his first name, which I rarely ever say his first name. And so they had to say that he had entered our home. He was holding us hostage two children, my mother, at the time they thought my father was still alive. They did hear a gunshot go off because my brother was still in the home when my father was shot and killed. And the constable told these two officers, go out and see if you can talk to Andre. See if you can get him to come out and try to talk to him. And then call me when you get there. So these two officers did just that. And Announceable fell back to sleep. He did not wake up to call his next chain of command, which would have dispatched a SWAT team to our home. He was also the only hostage negotiator for that RCMP unit, and he did not come, and he went back to sleep. So the first 911 call, as I said, went in at 2:30. And I said, we sat in that house for 6 hours being held hostage, but the SWAT team did not show up to our house until just after 7 a.m. And at 6:30 in the morning, my mother was shot and killed in front of my 5-year-old brother and I. And then he turned the gun on himself and he committed suicide in my bedroom while my brother and I sat on my parents' bed beside my father, watching my mother die. She was shot and killed almost instantly. And we sat in our home for 2 hours waiting for the RCMP to come in and rescue us. At this time, several 911 calls went in. I called for help at one point. I was hung up on by one of the dispatchers. There's a 911 recording of me calling and asking for 3 ambulance because I don't know where my older brother is at this time in the house. And we just sat and waited. The two first responders who came into the home with the SWAT team were community members, and this is probably one of the most, I've said this story so many times, but saying this part of it is they were so affected by that day that they themselves quit and they never returned to their jobs after that. I was told recently that my grandfather, my father's father, was the first who entered our home that day. He had enough of the SWAT team. And so that is why the SWAT team came into our home when they did, because my grandfather broke the line and came to our house door to get in. I was on the call with my grandfather while we were inside the home and telling him where everyone was. So I know he knew that my father either needed help or that at that point he had died already. And so he was going to take matters into his own hands. From there, we moved to St. Catharines, Ontario, because he let my mother write a note that evening. My parents didn't have their will. They had many things in order for fear that this day would come. However, they had not got to writing a will yet. And so we moved here to St. Catharines at my mother's wishes, and I lived here with my mom's side of the family. I did not want to come here. I didn't want to be displaced from my community. I was literally ripped from everything I knew. I'm so grateful now that I have two, I have my family here, which I always had, but I have a deeper connection with them, and I have a connection back home, and I have friends that I've made here and friends home. So I can't say that I don't wish I ever moved here, because I am so grateful that I've been gifted all of the support and love that I have around me, and I wouldn't change anything for the world. So please, when you hear my story, don't feel sad. I don't go without at all. And so when I moved here, it wasn't the way things would be now. And I think still our mental health system is lacking. And when we moved here, I never received proper post-traumatic care. My older brother actually aged out and turned 18 within 2 months of moving here. And I remember receiving one play-based therapy with my younger brother, and I was well aware of what was happening. And so from there, we never received proper post-traumatic care. I fought very hard to move back home, and life continued. I did end up moving back to Manitoba. I graduated there, and then I made my way back here just before my 18th birthday. I had the opportunity to move here, and I met my now husband, who we raise 3 children with here in St. Catharines. And unfortunately, like I said, my older brother and my younger brother and myself never received proper post-traumatic care. And the trauma and just everything became too much for my older brother. And just before his 29th birthday, or sorry, before his 30th birthday, he died. He committed suicide, and that death shocked our family. But at the same time, looking back now, I know that my brother was in pain, and that's his story to tell. But his death rocked me. I mean, after going through everything with my parents, I honestly can't even compare losing my brother to them, because he was everything, right? I literally had more of my life with him than I did my parents. And so he was mine and my younger brother's best friend, and I'm so grateful for the time that I had with him. But I see now the gaps and the holes that need to be fixed to ensure that more loved ones don't succumb to mental health. And now my story goes, in 2017, my cousin reached out to me. She works for, and I'm so grateful for her. She reached out to me. She lives in Toronto, and she's from Manitoba. And she's actually my cousin through my adoptive family. And I never say that, but because she's my family, it doesn't matter, you know, how she's come into my life. We've claimed each other, and that's how it goes. And so she reached out to me. She works for the Friendship Center. And she said, your parents' names were named in a professor's thesis in Ottawa. And this professor is writing for calling on for a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Would you be interested in reaching out and maybe testifying? And I said, yeah, of course. My family had always talked about our story, but I never quite understood when she said that, like, how am I'm not the woman, and my mom wasn't the woman, it was my father. I didn't understand it. It felt very disconnected, but I said, and any way that I can help, I will. And so I did. I testified in 2017. I flew to Manitoba and I testified for the national inquiry. I started my healing journey, a journey that I never thought or knew that I even needed to do. And then that began me really propelling back into reclaiming my culture. As I said, like, I always knew about my culture, so I wasn't completely disconnected. You know, there are people who are completely disconnected and have no clue whatsoever about their culture, their ancestors. I knew every single time I went home, I was surrounded by community members. I got to, you know, partake in community events if I happened to be there when those were going on. And of course, as a teenager, that's not necessarily something that's at the top of my list. So while I was back home at the time, I didn't necessarily dive back into that reclaiming, or even to understand that it was taken from me in a sense. And so that began in 2017, my journey of reclaiming my culture and who I am at the core. And in 2019, I was sitting at my desk in my office, and I actually in my home office, and I went downstairs and I said to my husband, had nothing to do with, I wasn't doing any cultural work whatsoever. And I said to him, I know what it is I'm going to do. I'm going to be me. And he was like, okay. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to be me, a Métis woman. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I thought you already knew that. And I didn't, but it's so funny to see what other people see and you don't see, right? And so I said that, and I'm not kidding you, within 2 weeks, January of 2019, Commissioner Michelle Odette called me, and I'm so grateful I picked up the phone to that unknown number. And she said, she invited me to join the national inquiry, so the National Family Advisory Circle. So I joined the commissioners and fellow family members through NFACT, and I had this incredible opportunity to journey with them. And I had major imposter syndrome. We're sitting at a meeting in BC and we're sharing our stories, and I still don't understand. I'm listening to these women share their stories of trauma and grief, and I'm thinking, who am I to be here? I don't understand this. I'm not the woman. I'm not the survivor. I'm not missing. I'm not murdered. I don't understand. And it wasn't until June of 2009, at the closing ceremonies, I clenched my husband's hand. And with tears rolling down my cheek, I said to him, I understand. I'm the girl. I was the one displaced from my community. And so, on a day when we're handing over the final report to the nation, calling on help, I realized that it was all of these systems and this wasn't this one event. It was many things that took me away from my community, took me away from my culture, and also made me not feel comfortable necessarily going back to it. And that truly, in like a nutshell, is how I began this journey. And from that point on, I knew that I was here to do, as I said at the beginning of the inquiry, I will do anything I can to help. And so every time I share my story, I take healing from it. And, again, I want to thank everyone for that, because I dive in and I discover something new, something that I need healing from, or something that I've left behind. And for the longest time, I felt awful when I shared my story. And I shared that with an elder, and an elder said to me, don't, because if you're taking healing, then you're also leaving something behind. And then I had the great opportunity to hear an Australian elder in the past year say, you can't unhear. After she shared, you can't unhear what I said. So now what will you do with it? And so when I end, sometimes I like to leave people with that, is now you can't unhear what I've said. So what will you do with it? And I take that with me through this whole journey as I continue on and I continue my work. And in this past year, I've had the calling to start a fundraiser. I will be on December 4th, the first family member of my immediate family to turn 38. My father was just shy of 37. And so on September 16th, I became the oldest living member of my family, and I celebrated that with a fundraiser, a GoFundMe, that I started back on June 16th. It was a very scary day. I thought, what if I don't even raise a goal of $3,000? I don't want to disappoint these two organizations. I chose two organizations. One, the Manitoba Métis Federation, my local though, specifically the St. Eustache local, for the money to be used for youth, to ensure that they know who they are and not to have this identity trauma journey that I've gone through and I continue to go through. And then the other organization is here in St. Catharines. It's Abbey House. And Abbey House is a transitional home for Indigenous women who support Indigenous women here in the Niagara region transition and reconnect them to their spirit and continue their journey. And so that's where these two, the money raised from the GoFundMe went. And I had a goal of raising $3,000. And I believe it was about October 1st, just after National Truth and Reconciliation Day, we hit over $101,000. Most people don't know this. I did not close the GoFundMe. It is still generating donations, which I'm so grateful for. And the organizations have received most of the funds, but they continue to come in, which is such a blessing. And I have, a future fundraiser coming up for Abbey House here in the Niagara region. I partnered with a wonderful business, and we're going to be celebrating my birthday together And I'm very excited to take that as my celebration, that I'm still here, and I will do what I can while I am here. And I'm not doing it to say I did it. I'm doing it because I know that that's the journey that I'm here for, and that I need that as well, as much as I'm helping. Well, it's not just me, to be clear. There's many donors who have helped with this GoFundMe, but we are all helping these organizations, and in turn, I'm taking something, as that elder said, and that's healing. So I'm so unbelievably grateful. And I just want to thank all of you. And so going forward, whatever you took from me speaking today, I ask you to think about, what will you do now? And I know that we have a Q&A now, so I'm happy to answer all of those questions. And I just want to say, Marcy, thank you for having me. And again, I'll sit and process today. I've had a lot weighing on me since September 16th. So honestly, I think this came at the perfect time today. So thank you.
Fallon, thank you. On behalf of Women for Change and Hamilton Community Foundation and everyone on today's call, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for being such an incredible advocate. I think I speak for everyone when I say we're honored to share this morning with you and to hear your story firsthand. So thank you. I am now going to open the floor for questions. We have a few already here to get us started. And like I mentioned, please put any of your questions in the chat box as we go here. So the first question, can you share what we can do to support the work of the MMIWG inquiry?
Yeah, absolutely. So recently with the funds, just to give you a couple ideas. So recently with the funds that Abbey House received, they shared with me that they're going to have a mural painted. And they're going to actually have this mural painted within the Friendship Center, because Abbey House is affiliated with one of my local friendship centers. I've claimed it as mine, as it's not mine, but the one that I have the opportunity to sit and share and be a family, part of a community with. And so they're going to have a mural painted. And that mural is going to be painted by an incredible Indigenous artist here in the Niagara region. I've actually had the opportunity to speak with her at a couple events and hear her story of human trafficking. And it is absolutely incredibly incredible. It's filled with so much bravery and strength. And so it was Carl who shared with me, they're having this mural painted because he heard Corinne. So Corinne was one of the research leads for the National Inquiry. And she said how you can help Indigenous women, how you can support the work of MMIWG is have our women support them, uplift them, show them in your community. And when he said that, at first I was like, oh, that's nice, like a mural, like I'm happy they're supporting an Indigenous women. But at the same time, there was like kind of a disconnect, right? I wasn't quite understanding. And as soon as he shared what Corinne had shared, and I know Corinne, and I'm so grateful to know her. And I was like, I get it. We have to uplift. And in those sense, like having the women shown, having them seen in our community. So having me here today, that's just one way, right? So continuing to uplift Indigenous women, allowing our voices to be heard, see those women, show the women in the community. So if you have more opportunities that you can involve Indigenous women in, have those conversations, bring them, invite them, and don't just invite them to have a seat at the table, but build that table with them. Right? And so that you can all come together and then read the 231 calls for justice. That sounds like a lot. I promise you, one, it is not. And two, it's broken down into sections. So I know many of you are coming from different backgrounds and, different professions. There are sections broken down to educators, how you can implement the calls for justice, what you can do. There is for all Canadians, very simple, tangible calls for justice. I look at the TRC and I think, oh my goodness, like how do I do something with this? I do feel that, again, there are tangible things with the TRC, but I feel like the calls for justice, we did a really good job at, or not me, but like all of us collectively did a very good job at breaking it down so that it can be something that you can implement and call on your family members and have the hard discussions. I had someone tell me once the conversations of change happen around the dinner table. Questioning and calling people in. Don't call people out. It gets us nowhere. Call people in and have the conversations. And that's where the changes and the support can come for MMWG. If you have the time to listen to, there are video recordings and audio recordings for testimonies. Mine would be on there as well. So the National Inquiry's website, it's MMIWG I'm sure you guys can share it too, ffada.ca, and right on there are the calls for justice, the inquiry, all of the audios. Have a moment and listen to the stories, because once it wasn't even for myself until I journeyed that I could really connect what is happening and has happened to Indigenous women to all of the legacies of colonization, right? The 60 scoop, residential schools. So once you come to understand and hear these stories, you will, without a doubt, be able to put together and then see how you can bring change as well.
Thank you. I'm just putting a few links in the chat that you will see that people are sharing. So feel free to click on those. The next question here is, what do you think are the biggest gaps for Indigenous women and girls locally in Niagara or perhaps in Hamilton in terms of support and programming?
I think that the biggest gaps are access to some of the services. I'll share with you all a personal, maybe to help you understand some of the gaps. I am Métis. I have incredible, I've been given this opportunity to have benefits for mental health services. However, those don't continue, right? And so for myself alone to receive support or the knowing of where to go that also is like culturally aligned with something that I want, I have to jump through hoops, even within organizations that are Indigenous organizations, because of all the systems that are at play. Like it's not, I know all of you know this, right? It's not just black and white, and it's, there's very large gray area. And so even for myself to access those supports, it's not simple. And so I actually, until I walked this journey, I wasn't even aware fully of some of the gaps, even within our mental health area, that I would come across. I would think that, oh, well, that's not me. That would be for someone else. I have access to these. I have this, I live in the community and I can talk to people. There are ways for me to go about getting these resources. However, there's still a disconnect. And so I hope that me giving you my own personal journey will help you understand further that until we're really in it to see it, some of those gaps are actually unknown to even us as Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. Little bit of a lighter question. Thinking about holiday season and supporting Indigenous women, how do you suggest we find places to purchase local Indigenous products or support local Indigenous women?
Absolutely. So I spent the better part of yesterday trying to compile a list of reaching out to some of my friends who are Indigenous artists, business owners. So you'll be able to find that soon. I'll put it on my social media, which is just my name, Fallon Farinacci on Instagram. And so I will be sharing that there. There is actually the Native Art Society in Toronto has a storefront now that they will have showcase Indigenous artists. So I highly recommend you just doing a simple Google search for the Native Art Society in Toronto, and you'll be able to find many Indigenous artists there. I can't wait to go up to Toronto because this is a new place. So I want to go because a lot of artists, right, they'll all be localized in one storefront, essentially. So yeah, so I'll be sharing, and then you can donate to Abbey House directly. You know, Abbey House is amazing. I'm not sure of, personally, I don't know specific one in Hamilton, but by all means, I suggest doing that. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to have some other type of Christmas fundraiser. So Abbey House had started a registry. I had encouraged them to start a registry back in August because I thought some people might not necessarily want to donate, you know, a financial donation to the GoFundMe. A lot of people like to actually donate an item or service or time. And obviously time or service cannot be donated to Abbey House because you know, these women are in transition and sometimes they're coming from a dangerous situation, so that can't be open for the public. However, I encourage them to do a registry, and so they did. With a lot of the funds, they were able to purchase a lot of the items off the registry that weren't purchased. But I hope, so if you do follow me along on my social media journey, I will hopefully have an update as to whether they will have added more things to this registry. And it's simple things like sheets and bedding, so that when the women leave the home, they can take those things with them. And then I'm also in the talks of maybe doing a shoebox drive for Indigenous women as well in the community. And that's just simply giving them, you know, the things that, not necessarily toiletry items, the way shoeboxes are normally done. I'd like them to be given things like a gift card to go and maybe get a haircut or have their nails done, things that we often take for granted and are just a part of our everyday lives for some of us. I think that, you know, if they have a place like Abbey House to give them the roof over their head and help them on that journey and have the toiletries there, then let's actually gift them with something. I don't think a gift is the basic necessities that we need, like soap. I think a gift actually is to come from our heart and wanting someone to enjoy something. So if I can tell you that, if you're going out and you know of an organization in your community, in your city in Hamilton, think of that when you're giving a gift, right? So yes, people need those basic needs, but if they have already like a place that's helping to support them, like Abbey House, then let's, you know, give from the heart too, right? So.
Thank you, Fallon. There's some great comments in the chat box here. Fallon, I applaud your bravery, open heart to share your story, your voice and face. You're an inspiration. Healing is non-linear, and I hear your story. Thank you. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you so much for your courage. Lots of incredible comments from our group. I think I'm going to, we have one more room time for one more question here. And it's, what are some of the things people have taken away and done as a result of hearing your story, Fallon?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I feel like it's like, to answer that would be like boasting. I don't know. That makes me feel, all of those things turning to myself makes me feel uncomfortable. I guess people are learning, they're having the conversations. We're here today. That's one way, right? You heard my story and you've been following me along on social media. And so perhaps that opening up the conversations to more people. And if I can say something that's somewhat selfish, is from me sharing, is I've actually had a lot of doors open for community connection. And I don't mean doors open as like opportunities for, jobs or anything like that. That's not even close to what I'm saying. I've been gifted the opportunity to connect with community members, where even people in the community maybe weren't even aware that I was seeking that connection and that belonging. And so I've been welcomed with open arms in that way. And then having the conversations with non-Indigenous folks and our community members. Our mayor has been incredible with wanting to learn Walter Sinzek, to learn more about MMIW. And I really do believe that many people who have heard or come across my story have or are working towards implementing change in their communities. And that's all I can ask for. I take it as I'm here to share. Yes, it's my story, my truth, but it's also my parents' story, my brother's story, and so many others. And so I never, speak outside of what is my own story, because I don't, that's not mine to tell. So whatever I can bring to the table to help bring change, then I will do just that.
Thank you. Well, once again, Fallon, thank you for being here. To everyone that joined us this morning, thank you for joining. If you have any questions about Women for Change or about Hamilton Community Foundation, feel free to reach out to myself. And if you're curious on following Fallon's journey, as she mentioned on Instagram, you will find her there, Fallon Farinacci. With that, thank you all. I hope you all have a wonderful Tuesday. Fallon, thank you again from all of us for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I honestly am going to just sit and process the whole day, and I'm so grateful, and I hope to one day come across all of you and hopefully be in the room with you, because this group inspires me to want to continue down this journey that I am on right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Fallon. We will definitely make that happen, an in-person event. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.